Oh, hi everyone, Andre here again. Hope you've been having amazing reads since our last video. And I'm here once again for another book review. And this week we're delving again into the science fiction realm, and this time we're reading The Children of Men by P.D. James. I'll try to refrain as much as I can from spoilers, but I can't promise anything because I might just start ranting, and if I say any spoiler, I'll put a warning for you guys. So this is a dystopian novel, a standalone novel, first published in 1992. And it has a movie adaptation in 2006, which is fairly recent. I mean, not really that recent. It's been close to 20 years, oh god. I haven't seen the movie, but I will chat about it towards the end of this review. So stay tuned. But going back to the book blurb goes as follow. And again, if you don't want to hear anything about it, just go to this timestamp and you'll skip it. The human race has become infertile, and the last generation to be born is now adult. Civilization itself is crumbling as suicide and despair become commonplace. Oxford historian Theodore Farren, apathetic towards a future without a future, spends most of his time reminiscing. Then he is approached by Julian, a bright, attractive woman who wants him to help get her an audience with his cousin, the powerful Warden of England. She and her band of unlikely revolutionaries may just awaken his desire to live, and they may also hold the key to survival for the human race. Now, so far so good, right? The premise is promising a lot. Did it deliver? Maybe, or maybe not. Let's start with the plot, and maybe I'll give the score of the plot first, because the criticisms I have about the plot also are mostly at the start of it. So I'm giving the plot a 2 out of 5. And why so low? Well, there is a plot, and the plot in itself is interesting, but it only starts like a third of the way through the book, maybe even later than that. And only then do we actually realize what is the purpose of the story we're reading, which I think is quite late for a book that has less than 300 pages. But I mean, that could be excused if then what we had for a plot was amazing and it was able to twist our heads back and forth with surprises, but the fact is that it didn't deliver like that. It left a lot to be desired, especially with the conclusion of it. When the book is coming towards the climax and towards the end, everything happens so fast in a blink of an eye that when it happened, I was just like, oh, is that it? Did it actually end? So yeah, overall it was interesting, but it left a lot to be desired, hence the 2 points. The characters of this book is what I probably like the most, and that's saying a lot because usually science fiction from this time doesn't have the best characters, and I know that the last science fiction review that I did of Hyperion, I said that the characters were amazing, but I think this one is back to what usually science fiction characters are. And the worst is that we don't even follow that many characters. We mostly follow Theo, who is most of the times just going through the world and observing what is happening and reflecting on it, and it's honestly quite boring. But there is a redemption halfway through the book where things become more active and action starts happening, and Theo is propelled through the plot because of it. He is prompt into action and he becomes more of an active protagonist, and I think that's partially what the author wanted to show, and that's when it became a little bit more interesting. And that, together with other side characters that show up that I don't really want to say much because of spoilers, I think that was worth a 3 out of 5 for character. Now world building. World building. This category disappointed me a lot. I thought the premise was really good. It had so much potential, especially because there are so many, or at least some other good books with similar premises of society losing its capacity of having babies and how humanity deals with that, such as The Handmaid's Tale. And initially this book was delivering on it at the same level as The Handmaid's Tale. Some of the changes the author made on how humanity would react and how humanity would evolve when this started to happen, I think was possible and it could happen. But then, and this might be spoilers, so you might want to skip to this timestamp and skip all the spoilers, but I'm gonna go into it now. The fact that the humanity in general wasn't caring anymore about having kids and therefore wasn't caring that humans were going to go extinct, I thought that was very unlikely and very unrealistic. And I think the views of things like HIV and adult content were so outdated, especially because this book is supposed to be set in 2021. I feel that it was so drastic seeing how our world is at the moment and how the world the author described could be, that it was very drastic, and I couldn't imagine our world going in that direction, especially if it meant that we were no longer gonna survive as a species. I don't think people would just be like, oh, I guess that's okay, what else can we do, right? I felt that it would never occur like that. I felt like this book was written maybe even before the 90s, and it was written maybe in the 80s or 70s. It had frozen like that, in that image of humanity as this thing that doesn't have any motivation for anything, really. I felt this so implausible that it kind of broke my belief in this book, and because of that, I got distanced from it and I couldn't really delve into it as deeply as I wanted. And I know we could argue that this book was written in a long time, so maybe perspective of people of that time was this, and that's what they thought the world was going to turn into. But I can also argue that there are many other authors, even older than this, that have written science fiction and predicted on how humanity could go, and I think their predictions were more accurate, and there are some that have predicted accurately and certain things have happened. So I don't really think that's a good argument for this book. So that actually makes me wonder, will this book disappear from our shelves because it's not predicting as accurately how humanity could go? And there are maybe better books that do this, such as The Handmaid's Tale, that indeed had an adaptation as well for a TV show. Yeah, and I know that I'm saying it's unrealistic, the things that this author describes, and people will say, oh, but dragons are also unrealistic and you love reading about them. It's true, but however, I think that the fact that a fantasy world with dragons is completely different from our world, where this one is based off of things in our world, is based off of our world, as if it was 1980s and then 2021, and it's so different from our current 2021 that I can't really see it becoming realistic in the minimal sense. So overall, after all this rant, the score I'm giving for world building is a 1 out of 5. And luckily, there were some nuggets that I thought were interesting perspectives on what we would do as humanity. And that's why I'm giving a 1 instead of a 0. Now, moving on to writing style. The prose, per se, does not have any problem. It's direct at times, and in other times it describes scenes like they should be with great detail because they're important scenes. So I think in that sense it's done well. But the pacing of this book was definitely not my taste, because we have so many parts that just drag on and on and on, and they just keep dragging and in the end don't seem to influence at all anything, or if they do, they don't influence that much, or they're forgotten soon after. Okay, that sometimes it serves to deepen the world building and to show us different things that are happening in this world because of the consequences of people's actions, but still, it felt very drag. And if the pacing felt snail paced at the start, towards the end it was almost like a cheetah paced book because it was happening so fast. So that we have this dichotomy of very slow at the start and very fast at the end that didn't join very well with overall the book, especially because, again, the book has less than 300 pages, which is not big, so we can't go from slow to fast that quickly. So overall, I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. Now for our last category, enjoyment. Did I enjoy this book? Yes and no. I know I've been ranting a lot about the world building and all the wrong things, or the things that weren't so positive for this book, and I do mean them, but I think there are also some positive things. There were some parts I was genuinely interested in, especially at the start of the book when we're exploring this idea of humanity not being able to have any more kids. How has the world dealt with it? I thought that part was fascinating and I wanted to know how the author thought of it. And when the central plot started happening, I was also interested in it because finally something was happening and I wanted to know, again, where the author was leading us with it. And in the end, even though it was very, very fast, there were some crumbles there of themes that the author was exploring. Even though it was too late to explore them, I still felt that they were important to be explored, although a bit out of place. That's why it's a so-and-so for enjoyment. Overall, I think I was more bored than enjoying this book, and that's why I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. And now that I've spoken about all the categories, let's go to the final remarks. Here you have a summary of all the categories and their scores. I think this novel had a lot of potential. My problem is it barely delivered on the potential it had. I've heard the movie adaptation is one of those cases where the movie is actually better than the book, and I can see why. I can see that we would cut off a lot of those boring parts at the start. The plot would start right away. It wouldn't meander so much, and at the end, I think it was probably going to be less fast and people would be able to understand it better. And at the same time, I think they would probably scatter some action in the middle, which would make the plot not seem so slow or, again, so meandering. And in fact, reading the book left me curious to see the adaptation, so I might do that. But for now, staying with the final score for this book, we're giving it a 2 out of 5. It's just below average, but there's still some good nuggets of science fiction in there with some good ideas being explored that I like, and that's why I read science fiction. I like that exploration of ideas. I just thought that those ideas could have been explored maybe a bit differently or better. 5.6. And it's interesting because this book has a score of 3.67 on Goodreads with over, I think, 40,000, total of 46,000 reviews. But I still think that the score of 3.67 on Goodreads is actually quite low for a book. And I know that I'm saying this giving a lower score, but yeah, it's still impressive. So that is it, folks, for today. Do I recommend this book? Maybe not too enthusiastically. If you want to read about some cool ideas or maybe some ideas of how our world could have been, although I don't think our world could have been like this ever, give it a go. But overall, I think there are some of the novels that have similar premises that take advantage of being read first, and that is The Handmaid's Tale, for example. I think it does a good job with a similar premise, and once you've read several books like that explore the premise of humanity not being able to have any more kids, then maybe you can jump to The Children of Men and see yet another perspective. But maybe I would not recommend this one as a first one or a first dive into dystopian science fiction. And I wonder if this is even P.D. James' best work, or maybe she has written some other work that is considered actually her best work. If you've read more books by P.D. James, let me know if you like them or if you have the same opinion as me regarding to this one. Otherwise, let me know what your favorite dystopian science fiction book where people have not been able to have kids is. Comment down below and I'm gonna give it a look and see if there's anything interesting to read. If you enjoyed this content, I would appreciate if you could subscribe and like, and I will be seeing you soon. Hope you have amazing reads, recommend them all the way, and I'll see you next time. Adeus.